If you are thinking about buying a 2022 LG OLED TV, I'm going to tell you 6 things you need to know to help you understand the differences between the A2, the B2, the C2, and the G2 OLED so that you can make the correct purchase decision. 1. There's a new, smaller 42-inch screen size representing the smallest WRGB OLED TV so far, which will be very appealing to gamers as well as those who don't have room to accommodate a larger display. However, just like what we've uncovered using Google's cache last year before the television was announced, the 42-inch model is only available in the C2 range within LG's 2022 OLED TV lineup, which, to be fair, isn't a bad thing at all, because the C series is LG's most popular, mainstream, bread-and-butter OLED model, and the C2 will feature the company's most advanced Alpha 9 Gen 5 processor, as well as 4 HDMI 2.1 ports with 4K 120Hz Dolby Vision, G-Sync and AMD FreeSync Premium support. Note that the 42-inch C2 will have a different stand design to larger screen sizes. LG has recognized that many owners of this TV will be using it for gaming or even as a monitor, and so has implemented a pair of feet which props the panel up higher than the usual slope stand on C-series OLED, creating space for a keyboard and mouse or even a console beneath the screen. Also, new for 2022, the LG C2 series will be getting the OLED EVO technology, which should allow for higher peak brightness without a decrease in OLED lifespan. Now, some 2021 C1 OLED televisions, particularly the 77-inch and the 83-inch models, already carry the so-called EVO panel, but their peak luminance and full screen brightness have been packed to the same levels as C1 with non-EVO panels. LG has only unlocked the higher brightness for the flagship G1 series with OLED EVO technology. This year, with an official OLED EVO designation, the LG C2 should also benefit from higher brightness to deliver more impactful HDR, although the 42-inch and 48-inch models won't go as bright, due to smaller pixel size and higher pixel density, which reduces the pixel aperture ratio. Also, at the time I filmed this video in January 2022, there are no deuterium-based next-gen OLED panels below 55 inches on the market. Next, let's talk about the LG G2 Gallery series of flagship 4K OLED. And in addition to OLED EVO technology, the G2 will also be equipped with heat dissipation material, which is marketed as brightness booster technology by the South Korean brand. This marks the first time LG has put a heatsink onto one of its OLED TVs, which should bring a couple of advantages. First, it allows the OLED panel to be driven harder to attain even higher peak brightness, and indeed, LG has billed the G2 as its brightest OLED TV yet, although the company refused to be drawn on exact peak brightness figures, so we would just have to measure it ourselves when we get our hands on a review sample eventually. Second, based on our experience testing other OLED televisions equipped with heatsink, such as the Panasonic GZ2000, HZ2000 and JZ2000, as well as last year's Sony A90J, the heatsink would prevent heat buildup and hence clear away image retention quicker than on an OLED television without heatsink. The LG G2 is available in 5 screen sizes: 55 inches, 65 inches, 77 inches, and new for 2022, 83 inches and a massive 97 inches. The 97-incher is going to be the largest OLED TV in existence, available exclusively in the G2 range, featuring a 4K rather than 8K resolution of 3840x2160, so as to not to undo the extra brightness afforded by OLED EVO and brightness booster technology. Those of you who have followed LG's OLED television lineup from last year may remember the G1 topping out at 77 inches, and one of the reasons cited for the G1 not being available in 83 inches was that such a big screen size would compromise the flush-fit wall-mount gallery design. So how has LG managed to make an 83-inch and even a 97-inch model of the G2? It turns out that LG has made the C2 and the G2 more lightweight by using a composite fiber material. resulting in a 20% weight reduction going from the 65-inch G1 to the 65-inch G2. While the primary goals were for easier transport and installation, not to mention a lowering of carbon emissions, perhaps this shedding of weight has also allowed LG to pack as large as a 97-inch screen into the G2's gallery design. The LG C2 and G2 will also have narrower bezels than last year's C1 and G1, which ties in with one of the improvements brought about by the OLED EX technology developed by OLED panel supplier LG Display. Going through LG's 2022 4K OLED television lineup, the entry-level A2 series will only be 60Hz with no HDMI 2.1 support, and so won't be of interest to hardcore gamers out there. The B2 series is 120Hz with HDMI 2.1, but will be using a step-down Alpha 7 Gen 5 processor, so our advice is to always go for the C2 if you can afford it, because over the years, we have seen LG prioritize its more advanced televisions in terms of adding new features via firmware support. For example, the LG CX and GX received 4K 120Hz Dolby Vision functionality through a firmware update last year, but the BX was excluded. The LG C2 and G2 will feature 120Hz OLED panels driven by the Alpha 9 Gen 5 processor, and there has been a new development in terms of HDMI 2.1 bandwidth. This video is sponsored by Box, the online technology store. Visit box.co.uk for the best deals on TVs, soundbars, and all your other technology needs. All 4 HDMI ports have been upgraded to support the full HDMI 2.1 bandwidth of 48 gigabits per second, instead of the 40 gigabits per second bandwidth found on last year's C1 and 2020's CX OLED. However, this doesn't mean that LG C1 and CX owners should have buyer's remorse, because realistically, the most common HDMI 2.1 source devices also don't exceed 40 gigabits per second in HDMI 2.1 throughput. The Xbox Series X tops out at 40 gigabits per second, whereas the PS5's HDMI 2.1 bandwidth is even lower at 32 gigabits per second. The 48 gigabits per second of the LG C2 and G2 only comes in handy when the source device is capable of outputting 4K 120Hz at 12-bit 444 chroma, for example a PC with an NVIDIA RTX 30 series graphics card. Otherwise, I'm going to do a quick-fire mention of some of the more interesting innovations on LG's 2022 4K OLED televisions. The AI upscaling performed by the Alpha 9 Gen 5 chipset now upscales directly to 4K rather than going through intermediate steps, potentially reducing ringing and fizziness. Dynamic tone mapping has now been upgraded to a Pro version, which subdivides the screen into up to 5,000 blocks to analyze and tone map dark and bright areas separately. The popular game dashboard and game optimizer menu have been retained from last year, but there's now a new sports game genre option for playing sports games. The Smart TV platform on LG's 2022 televisions is now called WebOS 22 instead of WebOS 7.0, so that it's easier to identify with the model year. WebOS 22 supports up to 6 user profiles for personalized recommendations, so your family won't find out what you've been watching. Katy Perry music videos, for example. Prices will be announced in due course, with some models starting to become available in spring. But should you buy a newly launched television or settle for an older model? Well, it just so happens that I've done a video about that very topic, so go watch it here.